Hey guys, welcome. So I was gonna do a snake feeding video, but then I thought, like, why not make it educational? So today we're gonna be discussing how a snake actually is able to swallow larger prey, and then I'm gonna show you a feeding video of my Dumeril's boa eating a rat at the very end. So we all know that snakes can swallow prey that is larger than their head. And so how are they able to do that? There are some myths out there that snakes can dislocate their jaw, and that's not exactly what's happening here. So we're going to be learning a little bit about the anatomy of a snake. The snake's overall skeleton is pretty simplistic. I have a good example right here. This is a really small snake, but you can see how it doesn't really have a lot of complex structures to it. So our focus for today's video is actually going to be the head, because that's what allows it to be able to swallow such large prey. So unlike mammals, unlike us, snakes have a lot of adaptations in their skeletal makeup in their head that can make it so that they can swallow large prey. They can open their mouths at 150 degrees, which is much wider than any of us can. So for the purposes of today's video, we're only going to be talking about non-venomous snakes, because when you get into venomous snakes, things can be a little bit different as far as the teeth are concerned. So starting out with just the big differences between snakes and mammals is non-venomous snakes actually have 2 rows of teeth in their upper jaw on each side. And so if you're looking at your mouth, that is way different than us. And they're actually able to move those outer rows of teeth independently of one another, which is really cool. And all of this is to help the snakes swallow larger prey. And so if you've ever seen snakes' teeth, they're actually curved like this, and they curve backwards towards the throat. And the reason being is because that's going to help them walk their prey to their stomachs, but also it's going to help if you have a wiggling prey item where they can't really jump out of the snake's mouth. If you think about this as being your prey item and this as being your snake's tooth or teeth, if they hook into your item and then that prey is trying to snatch back, that prey is only deepening the teeth into its skin. You can't snatch back if the teeth are curved this way. So that also helps them. And you would imagine that this can be really hard on the snake's mouth. Always having to hook teeth into stuff, and stuff is wiggling around, or it may be wiggling around. So you can imagine that snakes lose teeth a lot. So snakes, although their teeth are attached to their bones, they are able to regrow teeth throughout their lifetime. So they go through a lot of sets of teeth where we kind of just get our 2 sets and that is it for us. So now that we touched on teeth, let's talk about the jaws. Kind of how the jaws are working. So one big difference between snakes and mammals like us is that we have our jaw hinge about right here. Well, on a snake, their jaw hinge is equivalent to being at about our ears. That is a big difference. Their jaw hinges, or also known as their quadrate bone, is really far back in the posterior of their mouth. And this is what allows them to have that 150-degree mouth opening every time they open their mouths. So we got that jaw hinge working for us because it's all the way in the back. But then also, as far as the lower jaw is concerned, they actually are able to move independently of each other. And the reason being is because at the tip of the lower jaw, it is not connected by a bone as our chin is. It is actually connected by an elastic ligament. So you have the quadrate bone here, you're going to go into the compound bone, then you're going to go into the dentary bone, and then you're going to go into that elastic ligament. So this is what it would look like. Quadrate, compound, dentary, and then elastic ligament. So that gives it the flexibility of these guys to move laterally independent of each other, which is really cool. Snakes do salivate to help them lubricate the prey item and help them walk it down their throats as well. Alright guys, so I'm just going to very quickly go everything that we just covered, just for clarification reasons, to make sure that I explained everything well. And also, I do want you to understand that we are not getting into the nitty-gritty of how all of this stuff works. We're really just talking in layman's and just highlighting the key things that are responsible for how snakes eat. So if you really want to get scientific with it and get deep down in it, then I definitely implore you to do your own research. So going back to this area on the skeleton, so again, there is not a bone here because in its place is actually an elastic ligament. And that is what's giving these two lower mandibles more flexibility, and it's allowing them to move side to side and to help walk that food in. They have 2 rows of teeth on each side of their upper jaw, and the outer rows can move independently of one another. And if it is a snake with fangs, it's always going to have its fangs on the outer row of teeth, also known as the maxilla. Remember that the teeth do curve towards the back of the throat. This is because the teeth act as mini hooks to prevent the prey from being able to easily wiggle out of the snake's mouth, but also it still does help when that snake is trying to walk the food to the back of the mouth. I also wanted to point out that the lower mandibles are separated into different parts. So you have the dentary bones at the front, which are loosely attached to each other through that elastic ligament. But then you have your dentary bone attached to your compound bone, which then is attached to your quadrate bone. And all of these points at which these bones connect give you different pivot points. It's allowing you a 3-part lower jaw system that is giving you extra stretch and extra flexibility to be able to swallow those bigger prey items. So our very last arrow points at our quadrate bone. So this is the bone that attaches the lower jaw to the back of the skull. And the quadrate bone is important because it acts as a double hinge between the upper and lower jaw. And this actually is what is allowing the mandibles to pivot vertically and horizontally. So I feel like we've touched on just the basic anatomy of how snakes are able to eat their prey. So now I'm going to show you a quick feeding video. So this is a disclaimer. If you're uncomfortable with seeing snakes feed on their prey items, then this is the time that you would like to click out. However, if you want to see everything that we've just discussed in motion, then keep watching this video. So I wanted to use my Dumerose boa. As you can see, she's in a different location than I would normally feed her in. She's actually on my coffee table, but I brought her out here because I thought it would be easier to record her from a 360-degree kind of view as I needed to if she wasn't in her cage. And she's a good eater, so she'll eat whether she's in her cage or not. And I usually tongue feed her, but I accidentally dropped the rat, so yeah. That's why it ended up falling like that. As you can see, she is a constrictor, so she is going to constrict her food. And one of the ways that snakes can tell that their food has either asphyxiated or is near death is that they can actually feel that heartbeat when they are constricting their food. So once it gets to a point where it is really, really low or non-existent, then they know that they did their job of constricting. Generally, she'll hold her food for a good five minutes usually. Even though it's already dead, that's just that instinct in them to constrict their prey. So now that she's satisfied with her constriction, she's going to try to start to feed. And generally when I tongue feed her, it doesn't take her a long time to find the head, but she really struggled with finding the head on this one. And some people are of the belief that they can find the head because they can smell the saliva from the animal. And I don't really know if that's scientifically valid, but however they do it, they prefer to swallow it head first. There are instances where snakes go from the tail end, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it's not common. And so generally they like to go from the head because it usually kind of makes everything streamlined and makes it easier to swallow. The hardest part on any animal or any person is their shoulders, because the shoulders is the broadest part of our bodies. So this is a really great clip because you can really see how she's stretching her mouth and how far back she can stretch her mouth as it pertains to her head. And it does look like she's missing some scales under her chin area, and I think that just came from her previous establishment. Maybe she was burned or something, because I have no idea where that came from. Again, she was a year old when I got her. But when she flips on her head like that, you can see kind of how that bottom jaw looks very flexible, how it's kind of seems like it's malleable and able to bend over the body of the rat. So unfortunately, I just really think she did not want me spying on her while she was eating, because you can tell she's kind of trying to hide her face. They are very vulnerable when they are eating, so snakes are generally trying to get to a place where they will not be disturbed while they have something in their mouth. But you can kind of see how she's kind of walking it up and walking it down her throat, and you can see her body movements are kind of moving in a wave type of motion just to kind of help push that rat down towards her stomach. Now this part is really cool, and I'm going to slow it down and zoom in just a little bit so you can see it, but pay close attention to her mouth. Did you see that? That little opening there, that is her glottis, and that is actually how they breathe when they are consuming prey, because if you can imagine, if it takes them 15 minutes to eat a prey item, that's 15 minutes without airflow. But snakes do still have nostrils, so they only breathe this way while they're swallowing prey. And actually, when you think of a snake hiss, most people think that they associate that sound with the tongue, but the glottis is actually what's responsible for making those noises when you are hearing snakes hiss. So that pretty much wraps up mealtime for my Dumeril's boa. You can see that she's still focused as she's still trying to use her muscles to push that rat down the length of her body where it needs to be. So this is a time that you still don't want to disturb them. She may still be a little food aggressive in this stage, so I am going to let her sit for a while. This may be random, but my ball python was also eating at the same time, so I decided to go ahead and grab a little footage of her eating. we're not going to watch her eat in her entirety, but I did want to point out something really cool that I got on camera. So just like before, I'm going to slow it down and then we're going to zoom in. And if you look really closely, you can see she has those 2 rows of teeth on both sides of her upper jaw, just like we talked about. So I think that's pretty cool. So that's it for me today, guys. I hope you guys got some type of education out of this video and that it was also enjoyable. If you're interested in subscribing, make sure that you do hit that subscribe button. I mean, don't forget or anything, because if you're interested, you will remember, right? Yeah. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.